Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. Before I start, just a bit of disclaimer. This video will be covering possible spoilers for the future of Genshin Impact's story, so if that is not the type of content you're interested in, please leave right now. With that said, let's get to it. So, there was a Twitter post by an account called Impact Mouse. I've never heard of Impact Mouse before, but apparently they just repost leaks that other leakers have already released before them. I don't know if this is true, and frankly, I don't really care. The reason why I'm talking about this is because this tweet made people really mad. The thing that caused this was one of the points in the tweet that said Genshin Impact is not a priority or main project of the company anymore. Obviously, this got a lot of responses with a lot of likes. A lot of people said that Hoyo doesn't care about Genshin anymore, and that this was very obvious, and everybody started doom posting because it's just Twitter. And then that got responses from other people who said that the leak was illegitimate and shouldn't be trusted. No, I don't really care about the drama itself. That's just usual Twitter nonsense. And the part about Genshin no longer being a main project was taken out of context anyways. But the other things that were mentioned in the leak are actually quite interesting. So the leak itself is technically not really a leak. That doesn't mean the information is reliable, but the source for this is a post on a Chinese forum that claimed to describe an interview with one of the Genshin developers at Fudan University. So what happened was that apparently Hoyoverse was doing a recruitment drive at the university and they were giving a presentation. And after the presentation, some people in the audience were able to speak with the presenter, who is one of the main writers in charge of the Genshin story. You can see the developer doing a PowerPoint presentation in the pictures. I have no idea if this is actually Fudan University or the images are real, but they do show a person who has appeared before in Genshin live streams and is confirmed to be on the Genshin creative concept and writing team. So what the source is claiming is that this information is coming from the Genshin writer Xiao Luohao. The Chinese post I found on this did not say that Genshin Impact was no longer a priority or a main project of Hoyoverse. What it did say is that it was implied that the center of gravity at Hoyoverse had shifted away from Genshin Impact. It's a very minor difference, and to be honest, I think even if it had been conveyed correctly, people would still have doom posted anyways, because people are very invested into Genshin Impact. I personally enjoy all of Hoyoverse's games, so I don't really, even Honkai Impact 3rd, which I enjoy much less than Starro and Genshin Impact, to be honest, because it's just a much older game. I enjoy all of their content, so, well, actually I have not played Tears of Themis, so I can't really say that, but I enjoy enough of their games that it doesn't really hurt me that much if they say they're not going to focus exclusively on Genshin Impact for, however long for the rest of their existence. So it's a very minor difference, and it was going to be controversial no matter what. To me, it's a very reasonable statement to make, considering how many games Hoyoverse is operating now. With the success of Honkai Star, I think it just makes sense that Hoyo will want to shift their resources to upcoming games like ZZZ and their other titles. So even if Genshin continues to be massively profitable, it doesn't make any sense for them to just put all their eggs into Genshin Impact, right? That's just one IP out of how many other franchises that they want to make successful. And it's not like Genshin's not getting anything either if the leak about the new Abyss mode in 4.7 does turn out to be true. It's just that it's happening very, very, very slowly. And I think it's very likely that this is because of Wuthering Waves and other content that has come out in Honkai Star Rail. It's being proven that in-game content does work for certain franchises, and maybe Genshin Impact is getting a bit more not innovative, but more explorative or more willing to do stuff that they weren't in the past. The post also mentioned a bunch of other things, some of which are related to the internal workings of Hoyoverse, but also a few things that Xiao Luohao allegedly confirmed about the future of Genshin's story. Apparently, the scene with the tree burning at the end of Winter Night's Lazo is not actually a metaphor or something that just doesn't happen in the story, because this has happened a couple of times in the past before, right? There was this one scene in the 2.0 Inazuma trailer where the traveler was underwater facing a giant shadow, but that just never happened in the actual story. And sometimes they'll show stuff from future versions that aren't actually in the game yet. Like in the 4.0 trailer for Fontaine, they show the sky cubes that are part of Fontaine, but you can't actually go there yet in 4.0 because they were locked out of the actual traversable map. So those are just a few instances where the trailer kind of did not match up to what was actually in the game for the patch that they were promoting. That's not the case with the tree burning at the end of the trailer. That is apparently, according to this post, confirmed to be a future event in the story. So that was a nice surprise for me, because when those things happen, it kind of ruins my immersion. It makes me feel like they're showing stuff that was part of a previous version of a story that didn't make it into the final cut, and they just had to put that shit in there in the trailer to pad out the content a bit, to make the trailer longer. So I'm glad that that's not the case if this post turns out to be true. You also mentioned that the Torre and the Crow Archon will do something players will not expect in the future, and we will meet a member of the Harbingers again at some point, and this is also supposed to be surprising. But if you follow the rumors, that's probably not going to be very surprising. For most of us who have been following the story, though, and not the rumors, I think it's just taken for granted because obviously Child is still out there. We're probably going to meet Child again, and obviously Dotori is being set up to do something later on in the story. But there have also been rumors that, let's just be honest here. We've probably heard that Senora is going to come back in some form during Natlan, and Xiao Luohao might be referring to that instead. The possibility of Genshin Impact 2 was also mentioned. It was confirmed that they now have the resources to make a Genshin Impact 2, which again isn't very surprising. They could make a lot of the stuff that this post says is not very surprising. That's why, that's including the part about Genshin not being a main project anymore, even though it's not conveyed correctly. It's not surprising, right? It shouldn't be a shocking thing to realize that Genshin is not the main focus of Hoyoverse anymore. They have multiple projects. And there's just a whole bunch of information like this in the post that could come from pretty much anybody, which is why I'm partially skeptical about the source. If it wasn't about some of the more like specific content that most people are not really mentioning because it's not controversial, right? You can't really say something controversial about Xiao Luohao because most people don't even know who he is. Yeah. They could probably make several Genshin Impacts at this point with the amount of money they have. Like, why is it even surprising that they're considering to make Genshin Impact 2? So it's just a non-statement. But that's not likely to happen anytime soon anyways, if the rest of the post is to be believed. Because even though we've already been to 5 out of the 7 nations in Teyvat, the story up to Fontaine is apparently only 1/3 of the entire Genshin story. I don't even think this is that surprising, but okay, let's just keep going. This is also isn't, making this video is kind of weird because most of the stuff that it says is just, I just assumed that this would be the case. Like, the Traveler's Travail trailer pretty much said as much, that we would go to Conria after the 7 nations are done, but this is just more confirmation that the story will continue after Teyvat. And with how much the power scaling has expanded with Skirk and the other characters like her, like, she mentioned that she had a master, the Fowl or something, and we have entire entities like the giant whale that are supposed to be able to destroy all of Teyvat, right? It was able to destroy all of Fontaine if it wanted to, and supposedly Teyvat, but I'm pretty sure some of the Archons would probably have stepped in at some point if we didn't stop it. But it was supposed to be capable of destroying all of Teyvat. We are on almost like a cosmic scale of power levels now. So it wouldn't surprise me, like, if we left Teyvat altogether and just went to another planet, or Celestia, or Conria. None of that is surprising. So the idea that the story for Genshin will end right after Snezhda is just not true. Even including Conria, that's only 3 years more of content, but we've already had 4 years worth of story updates for Genshin now. And that's only 1/3 of Genshin's entire story. So that is definitely hinting at the idea that we'll go to other places other than Teyvat eventually. That's pretty much all they had to say in terms of story spoilers. The rest of the post covers miscellaneous info about Xiao Luohao and how they write Genshin's story. The outline of the story is written 2 years in advance, and the people working on Genshin has switched multiple times. Again, not surprising for a game this size that has been operating for this long. It's been like 4 years now, so it just makes sense that not the same people will have written the same things. And, it's obvious that the team members change, right? You can't just have the same people working on the same thing throughout 4 years on a massive project that has like 500 people working on it. The most important Honkai writers will not handle the main Genshin story. The story for Fontaine and Sumeru were written by himself and another person called Lao Yao. Xiao Luohao himself has worked at Hoyoverse for a long time, and is second only to the original group that Dawei is part of. He also prefers the Shota and Lolly characters, but his favorite female character from Hoyoverse is Alicia from Honkai Impact 3rd. He first got into ACG with Cardcaptor Sakura, and he shipped Xianyun Li and Sakura when he watched it. It was also mentioned that the Xianyun banner underperformed compared to their expectations. One of the posters said he was at the lecture in person and provided info about what Xiao Luohao said about the controversy surrounding Scaramouche's public perception in China, as well as how Genshin's story is catered towards a mass audience. So if you don't know, Scaramouche has had a troubled, I wouldn't say history, but some people really, really dislike Scaramouche for whatever reason in China. And I think it's supposed to do with how he's depicted and how he's like a traitor or something, and how they don't like how Nahida forgave him. So there's this whole like there's this whole drama about that, and this is just asking about that issue specifically. I don't know if there's this drama outside of China. I don't know why it's specific to China, and frankly, according to the post, it's not even that big of a deal. So okay, so according to the post, this is what it says. I was there in person. After listening to the lecture, quite a few people surrounded the stage and talked to Xiao Luohao for an hour. The feeling I got was that he was a very passionate and serious, but clearly separated the business side of things and his own personal views. A frank response was given about the public perception on Scaramouche. According to analytics data, there's no need to address this. John Lee was addressed accordingly. As for Scaramouche, there is no need to address it. Maybe the people who are very opinionated don't have enough money, there weren't enough people in the movement, or maybe they don't even play the game. Self-reflect a bit. Even in a commercial product, the creator's self-expression still exists. Otherwise, the product would not come to fruition. Xiao Luohao mentioned that he had a relatively high evaluation of Scaramouche's story, but some couldn't understand it. Those who had a biased understanding were also very opinionated. Opinionated. Blah, I can't speak. Even if it was written according to the audience's desires, that doesn't mean it will have the desired outcome. Are your internal desires all the same? So basically, what he's saying is that the people who hate Scaramouche don't have a very good understanding of the story, and they made a big fuss about things that ultimately didn't have much of an impact. Compared to the controversy over John Lee when the game first launched, the Scaramouche stuff is just like it's small beans, right? It doesn't actually show up in any meaningful way in the analytics data, is what is being implied here. Even if they do write the story based on what these players want, he's saying that it's not guaranteed that people will like it because not everybody has the same opinion, right? So that's basically it in terms of that. It's like it's a non-controversy, much with like most things about Genshin Impact. It's just small beans. The poster also asked him about Genshin's target audience and how the Genshin team handles the lack of media literacy among its players, and this is what the post says. Xiao Luohao also mentioned that when Genshin was still in its launch phase, there was initially a key theme, but because it was not successfully monetized and had difficulty getting positive feedback, it was never publicly promoted. So we can trust that in Genshin, it is very unlikely for there to be very pretty women who have two-faced ulterior motives. Genshin is developed to be the game with the most mass market appeal for MiHoYo. From top to bottom, Genshin's primary consideration is to appeal to a wide audience and then to consider self-expression. So the comment about the pretty women with two-faced ulterior motives probably doesn't make a lot of sense to some people, but basically I think what they're saying is that you're very unlikely to see a character that is very unpopular or has morality outside of a range that is acceptable to the player base. Because honestly, if people don't like Scaramouche, then they're not going to like a lot of other characters if they behave in a way that, you know, a lot of people on social media find disagreeable. So that's basically, I think, what they're saying. And, you know, you have to appeal to a certain demographic. Okay, so the post goes on to say, this is a question I asked. Genshin has a very large audience because a portion of that group has been influenced by modern entertainment. Their reading comprehension and ability to empathize are very low. They are unable to understand metaphors, foreshadowing, or even things that are not conveyed 100% directly. But if these people are catered to too much, that inevitably causes the story to become juvenile and shallow. It makes the people who actually focus on the story to have a more negative opinion of the story. How does the Genshin team handle this problem? And the gist of Xiao Luohao's response was that Genshin also has always had mass market appeal as a requirement to have as many people as possible understand the story. For players who are very focused on the story, we have prepared the Narzizenkreuz book and various texts outside the story to delve into. As for the problem with catering to two different player bases, it can only be said that the copywriters have their own favorite group, and the planning department might also have their own favorite group. There is no possibility that one group will be abandoned in favor of the other one. Even though this makes the hardcore players' experience a bit worse, at least it won't exclude an entire group of players. And I think this could probably also be applied to the endgame content conversation, right? Everything about Genshin Impact ultimately revolves back around to, will this appeal to a wide group of players? And I think that's why they've been so hesitant to release end-game content, not just because they literally cannot, program or add that content to the game, or why does Paimon always repeat the same things over and over again? It's probably there for a specific reason. It's not that complicated, and that's basically it in terms of the information provided by this event. I guess is what I would call it. Whether or not you believe it's true or actually happened is up to you, but none of this should all be all that surprising. I think this was actually released by XG Diluc, I think. Yeah, I think that's his name. This information, this tweet was released by another leaker, and then it was like re-released by Impact Mouse 6 days later. So I don't know why everybody is going all haywire over this. It's basically how he worded it, right? It's like the news titles. It's based on, they want to create controversy, but it's not really even that controversial. I don't even think what Impact Mouse said was that controversial, even if Genshin Impact is no longer considered a main project. If they continue to release the same amount of content, I think that would be pretty much in line with what people already expect from Genshin Impact based on what they have released over the past 4 years, right? So it is what it is. Most of the information about Genshin, like a sequel or part 2 being considered, or that Dotoria and previous Harbingers will be returning in the future, none of that stuff is surprising. You should have been able to figure that out yourself. So that's part of what made me skeptical of the leak at first. Every time these leakers post something that is very vague, so that they can achieve the broadest range of success rate for their guesses as possible. But some of this other stuff is also pretty specific. The stuff about Xiao Luohao, I think it would be very wild that people would go to such lengths to make shit up about like a person who works at Hoyoverse. So that does lend a bit more credence to this not really a leak, because it was technically hosted at Fudan University in a public audience. So I guess I can say this is not a leak. And Hoyoverse not focusing most of their attention on Genshin anymore, that's not, I already talked about that. That's not really much of a shock. They have other profitable games like Starro now, and making sure ZZZ is successful should be at the very top of their priority list if it's not already. Because I really love the art style of that game. I want a mostly combat-oriented Hoyoverse game. That's right up my valley. So please make that a success. And I wouldn't say that it should come at the expense of Genshin Impact. But if it tops Genshin Impact's priority list as a priority at Hoyoverse, then I'm not going to cry about that. The stuff that Xiao Luohao said about Genshin's audience as well. If you read between the lines over the course of several years about when it comes to what Hoyoverse says about the game and how Hoyoverse presents the game, that also shouldn't be much of a surprise. The only thing that was even slightly surprising was that the tree burning is actually going to be part of the main story in the future. So, yeah, that's all the source really said. It's actually quite a lot, but it was pretty interesting outside of the stuff that people got really, really mad about. Anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out. I'll see you guys sometimes. Bye-bye.